my own experience with institutional and private equity firms is that investors often have a little bit different perspective. As an institutional investor, what are your expectations of a board regarding HCM? What do you look for when you decide whether or not to invest?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've been both on the active side and the passive side where I sit today as an investor. And you're absolutely right. The expectations can be very different. And I think some of those differences are grounded in the duration of the investment, the time frame that those investors bring to the investment and how they view various risks in the organization. You know, PE firms or active investors, typically when they think they're long term, they might be thinking 3 to 5 years out. When I think about investing in a company, I think about being a long-term investor measured in decades and decades and decades. I literally have clients that are putting money away today that won't pull the first dollar of their capital out until after 2060. So that's the investment duration I'm thinking about. It's kind of like, you know, when you choose a place to live, if you choose to be a renter or you choose to be an owner. You know, if you're a renter, you think about certain things, but if you think about being an owner, you think about different things. You think about how long is the roof going to last? What shape is the foundation in? Do we need new windows? Human capital to me as a long-term investor is the foundation for a lot of businesses. And we can talk about that in a while, how I think about that. But, you know, our hope is that boards treat the companies that they oversee like owners. You know, what does that mean? You know, first, that means treat human capital management as an enterprise risk, because that's what it is. And then the second thing is, just like Theo said, set a strategy. You know, what is your human capital management strategy going to be? It's not a silver bullet. There's not a one size fits all. Every company chooses a different way to tackle that risk. Once you do that, though, clearly delineate the responsibilities for managing that enterprise risk. Give us investors, you know, clear indicators of where the risk is in the organization. And a lot of companies are afraid to do that. But it turns out a lot of companies have the same problems. They just aren't willing to talk about those problems. And because they're not willing to talk about them, they don't understand that everyone's facing some of the similar challenges. But once you do that, you know, explain to us as investors, as shareholders, what are you doing to manage that risk? And then provide us with some objective information to help us measure what the outcomes of those risk management efforts are. That's really the baseline expectation that we have as investors of how you approach the problem.
In another survey, 51% of respondents said the top 3 stakeholders for any company are your customers, your employees, and your investors. Would you tend to agree with that? Is anybody missing from that list?
Yeah, I mean, I would generally agree with it. When I became the CEO of, it was Zale Corporation, which at the time was its own public company, and it was a falling knife. The business had been losing money for 3 years, and it was about to go out of business. And the first thing that I did in a public forum was to say that we're going to do this organizationally, which is flip the pyramid and put the customer and the people who serve the customers on top and put the CEO at the bottom, because we're only going to be successful if we serve the customers and if we serve the people who serve the customers. And a whole series of things ensued after that. If you are running a good company, if your people feel like they're part of the journey, if your people feel like those who are serving the customers are really important, all of the other stuff are trailing indicators. The success comes after that. The financial results comes after. Investors get really happy after that, but they're happy because you're running a well-run company where you've realized that engaged employees, engaged customers, people who are proud to come to work each day and talk about your company in positive ways, it's going to be infectious. It's absolutely going to be infectious.
The only thing I might add, Sherry, it's kind of back to Theo, what you talked about within your workforce and bringing people that kind of look like me, talk like me, et cetera, which is communities. I think that stakeholder is missing. And for some industries, it's even more important because of what's around your facilities and things like that. but how you bring those communities together, how you help your communities, because it goes back to the same thing on reputational quality, cultural quality, all those positive things that you get as an organization. More customers, probably as you're helping your local communities, the customers that are coming in as well. So I think for me, that piece is missing from that list. I'd add a fourth one to that list.
And as an oil and gas person, my entire career, I agree totally. We've had several comments in the chat to that effect, that communities and that relationship in helping build the community is vitally important. And someone used the term license to operate. Absolutely, I agree. We're coming up now close to our time to end. And I'd like to, we're going to close, but we're also going to have an opportunity for more Q&A. But Thea, when we had our pre-meeting, you talked about passionately about the role of CHROs on the board. Could you just spend a little bit of time on that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's high time for boards to understand that all of this conversation, the things that we've been talking about today, sit squarely in the realm of the human resources manager. Whether you're talking about succession, whether you're talking about compensation, whether you're talking about ESG, whether you're talking about DE&I, when you're talking about getting a granular view of what's going on in the workforce and the workforce reputation, they fall squarely in the purview of competent human resources managers. Now, saying that, not like any other board position, you want the best of the best. You want somebody who understands P&L management, hopefully somebody who's had some operating experience in their background, or at least has taken the time to understand the P&L. But having those people in the room and digging into some of these questions helps to raise the quality of the question. So I think it's high time for people to start thinking about really quality CHROs as members of boards.
Thank you. And I'm Linda and John, I want to give you guys also an opportunity for any final comments before we go to Q&A. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I just did.
Listen, I'll start, and John is a investor, maybe finish up. But first off, for the CHROs on the call, right? Be the business strategist with your executive team. You are the advocate for this. You have this information. Make it a business discussion. Don't make it an HR discussion. Make it a business discussion, and be the one to help push that discussion to be a part of your board package. Because I think that can help move that forward for the board to be able to provide that oversight. I would say for board members on the call, be that person to challenge the status quo, not just how you've always done it. Obviously be collegial in the process, but understand that, understand the issues, understand the risks that John talked about, right? It is an enterprise risk. Understand what that is, understand metrics, people metrics, as you understand business metrics. It's just another one. So you've got customer service metrics, you have customer acquisition, you have reliability and productivity, add in earnings, add in people metrics. It's how you run your business. And I think it's a miss if you don't have that part in your discussion. The last thing we talked earlier, somebody made a comment about quiet quitting. I think Sherry, you might have. I actually say avoid being distracted by buzzwords, because to be honest, quiet quitting's been around for a really long time. We just put a name on it. And I think if you focus on the metrics, you'll find out whether you got that thing going on, that people are leaving your organization for whatever reason, if you actually focus on those areas that are drivers for your business. And then lastly, as Thea mentioned, understand that people strategy so that you can achieve your future aspirations. Do we have the right people in place, executive or otherwise, to get you where you need to be?
And I guess I'll wrap this part up. As an investor, I come at it from a slightly different perspective, outside in. As an investor, please help me understand where the board responsibility lies for overseeing this risk. and how the board is doing it. I don't need to see the numbers and all the inside baseball granular data that the board is looking at and what's getting reported up by the CHRO. But I do need to get comfortable that the board is exercising that oversight on a regular basis. It's not a once a year committee topic that has 16 slides, goes through in about 10 minutes, and then isn't revisited until the next year. You know, give us something to work with so we understand what the processes are that the board is using. And then the second is, we didn't talk about this a lot, but a lot of the data that we've been talking about so far, the retention rates, attrition, promotion rates, are kind of lagging indicators of where culture is in the company. But a lot of companies are looking at leading indicators. They're doing pulse surveys, they're doing net promoter scores, they're doing all sorts of data collection internally. There's one company that we're invested in that every time an employee logs into their computer for the first time each day, they're given a survey question, answer, 1 to 5 stars, how much do you agree with this? And it's real-time data that they can look at to understand where are we headed, where's the trend, where are the hot spots in the organization. And different people get different questions every day, so they get a pretty broad sense of where the company's going. I'm not recommending that as a practice, but it's a neat innovation. It's a neat way that companies are keeping on top of where the organization is going from a leading perspective. And then the board's asking questions about that now. The board's asking, well, how's this trending and how's that trending? And are there hot spots and are there different parts of the organization that are outliers on certain questions? I mean, that's a neat way that we're seeing boards start to advance in how they're getting involved with some of this data. So a couple takeaways from me here at the end. Sherry?
And just to flip it a little bit on what John said, if an organization thinks about this area as an opportunity, you have less likelihood to think about it as a risk. Because I think it's a huge opportunity. And one last little bitty thing that's a little off script. I don't know if she's still on, but there's a woman named Gina Ortiz-Jones, who, when I was reading through the people who are attending, is a retired Secretary of the Air Force. And I'd just like to acknowledge her and say, thank you for what you do and what you've done.
That's very kind. Thank you, Theo.
So I'm
One of my
looking.
heroes in human resources management is a retired 3-star general, and we have wonderful conversations about how the military enables ordinary people to do extraordinary things. Unbelievable models, something to think about.
That might be worth a new program. Because we have several military members and thank all of them for their service.